and um, and then we decided to use hand sketch for all the plans, elevations, renderings, 3D views, even the little sectional study. Why? Because we want to give the local people feeling, okay, you're coming to a design professional which is adapt to your culture. So back to my point on day one is, software definitely it's a tool. It's definitely going to get you faster with your folks and groups. Um, Use that tool and then make sure, that's just something to help you, equip you. But the most important thing is here, right?
Well, thank you so much for that, Sing. Professor Jacobs, I see where you joined in. So I'll let you say a few words to kick us off here.
Yes, I'm getting ready to send this link to everybody because there's some faux pas that's happening that the hyperlink on the poster wasn't getting us to the same meeting. So that's
Okay.
why there were a few of us. Just give me 1 second and I will.
Sure.
Of course, it is trailing. So that's why we were sitting in the wrong meeting.
No problem.
Man, of course, this thing wants to
And for
stall.
those who have joined in, I would encourage you, feel free to turn on your camera. And I do have a presentation, but I'm if you want to stop me and ask me a question, like it's okay, just just jump in. And by the way, I did invite some folks from my office. So you have access to other architects as well. And we have Joanna Wong. She's part of our shared services group at RDC. So she actually gets to work with everyone in the company. So there are many interesting roles in an office, and so I think we'll talk a little bit about that. We also have Jack Lee. He's another architect in our office, and he actually has a certification for CASP, which is a California access specialty or specialist. Jack?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I thought that's me a bit. Yes, it's California Access Specialist. It's a DSA program, and yeah, so basically, we can after getting the certification, we can inspect buildings for compliance of accessibility.
So it's very important. That topic is actually a law, and so we definitely need to strive towards compliance, but really being good stewards of design to create a universal experience for many folks. So
yes, so I can jump in here for a second. I got that out to the masses, so hopefully they see it. Hello there, William. So for those unaware, I'm Ruben Jacobs, an adjunct faculty at El Camino College, also adjunct faculty at SMC too, Santa Monica College. So hopefully some of our students from both places are in attendance. But I've set up a program that got kickstarted, well, during the pandemic to try and create a lecture series for our students, as most universities have. And we started in the pandemic with a need and requirement to only be virtual, and it's actually lived on. It's easier, and it allows me to give reach to all students. So know that this is open for students near and far to attend, and professionals, but I know mainly students will be coming, and I certainly, as a SC alum, see some really good ones come up and say, "Ooh, can't get there tonight." And this is giving you an opportunity to go from your living room or wherever you're coming from to see and experience work from design professionals near and far. A couple of times ago, we had somebody from the Midwest presenting. But you as the visitors to this site here will see that a lot of the presenters bring more than one person to the table, as Carlos has done from RDC. And you're really getting an opportunity to see diverse folks that you should take advantage of, indeed asking questions. And as Carlos did ask, it'd be great if you guys turned on cameras and let people see who you are and all this good stuff. We certainly want your sound off until you have a question, but by all means, is more of a dialogue. So
Yeah.
don't necessarily wait till the end to try and ask something, although I will give some space at the end for some Q&A, but take advantage of this. One thing I do want to say to all and show is because we've recorded most of these lectures and presentations, there is a place that you can go access a lot of the ones that have been recorded in the past. And it's a really great place to see some things. For example, we had architects from HKS that did SoFi Stadium. So it's a very comprehensive presentation on that. And I will put the link in the chat again on where you can go to ECC Art Club's YouTube channel and see a lot of these pre-recordings. We also have in there a 4-part tutorial on using SketchUp. So again, this is all shareware and open to all. So I know a lot of schools teach it, but actually a lot of schools do not. You just pick it up and it's easy enough. So take advantage of what we have there because it is open to all, which leads me to one other exciting thing we will have our presenters do in a month is we're going to get a tour of their office on November 16th. So you'll get more details on that, but we'll have an RSVP so we know how many people are coming to that. But it's twofold: an opportunity to tour their office, which is pretty unique that they did a reuse project in converting what was an old Sears department store into their office, and also be able to slide right into a trade show that they are hosting that evening. And Carlos can talk a little more about what that is, but that will be a unique opportunity to see some architectural products that you wouldn't normally see without going to a bigger trade show. So it's all in one stop. And we'll show you how, I will show you later on how you guys could get there via Metro really easy because they're 2 blocks away from the Long Beach line station. So without further ado, I'm going to let them get further into their presentation now that we jumped in.
Okay, fantastic.
And
Well,
I
first of all,
apologize because, again, we
oh,
were in the wrong meeting somehow.
no problem. I just want to thank Professor Jacobs for reaching out and you know, it's architecture is such a connected world. And we know so many people. There's just like so many overlapping circles. So that's the world you're getting into. It's as you begin your journey, you definitely want to start to network and connect with people. On the chat, I put my information. I did have a slide for this, but if you want to copy it, at least you can grab it there. I'm going to try to breeze through some. I did have a really long presentation, but we'll see how much we can get through. And if we have to do a part 2, so be it. But I did want to, for those who just joined in, I do have some colleagues from my office that I invited. So I have William Ellsworth. He's an amazing designer in our office. I have Sing Tong, she's a project architect. Jack Lee's a project architect as well. Joanna Wong, she's with our shared services group. And so if I'm going to talk a little bit about our office. So I would love for you all to also sprinkle in any insight that you have about that. But let me kind of open up my, let me see if I can share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. And if someone could just moderate, and if there are any questions that pop up in the chat, please let me know.
I'll do that, sure.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you for having me. This is just a quick snapshot of my background. I'm a LA kid, grew up here in LA, went to public schools, attended Belmont High School. That was my first I guess exposure into architecture. You know, we had an architect come in and he talked to us about, he put down some blueprints, you know, back when we had those, you know, heavy chemicals. You know, that was just like amazing. I was like, whoa, what is this? You can, you know, how you can express a building through drawings. And so, and it was interesting, you know, he was just very genuine guy. And so that piqued my interest. That along with, you know, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of Lego stories here, a lot of folks who who had that in their childhood. And so I don't know if we're all just wired that way, but it's definitely not a prerequisite. There's many folks in our office that they study one thing and then they find their path into this profession. So you'll definitely find many professionals who take those avenues. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a linear path. And so from Belmont, I went on to USC, and I worked at pretty much, I've always worked here in LA in downtown firms. And then eventually got licensed. Then I sort of blitzed myself with all these organizations, you know, getting involved with the AIA. So I'm the VP of the Long Beach South Bay chapter. In this December, I'll be formalized as president. And, you know, I've been also working with NOMA in the capacity of attending many mentoring type events, doing portfolio reviews, doing mock interviews with students. So those are a lot of fun. And I always view these as opportunities to engage with emerging talent and really to see what they're excited about and to also learn from them. You know, the learning journey is not a one-way road. It's very much like you need to surround yourself with all these different enriched viewpoints. So I think we're in an interesting spot in the profession in general because of that. There's so much diversity that's coming into it. So this is really great. Along with that, I also got my NCARB certification. So, you know, for some architects, they opt not to pursue it, but if you do pursue it, it does give you the ability to get licensed easily in other states or other jurisdictions. I think that's a good thing for you to think about strategically because that the value of you having multiple licenses will be something of value to an office. So that's how you work your way into a pathway of you know, progression in your career and ultimately potentially into ownership. So along with that, I just crossed my 25-year mark in the industry, and I feel like I'm still learning. You know, it's not like, you know, it's funny. I just went to my my high school reunion, and someone asked me or just kind of said like, "Oh, hey, Carlos, you made it," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm still learning." You know, it's like it's not over. And so it's very much. I just want you to know that that's the beauty of this field is that you're always. It's very much a moving trajectory. So you're always going to grow. It doesn't matter when you start in that journey. Along the way, I did a lot of construction administration, and you know, I did in construction administration. You document the construction of buildings going up, right? So it could be seen as a very like, okay, I'm just dealing with the contractor, answering questions. But there was something really fun about documenting the buildings as they were getting built. And so through that process, I learned, kind of self-taught myself architectural photography. So I've been doing that professionally for about 10 years now, and actually have an upcoming lecture on that topic with the LA Center of Photography. So you just never know, you know, the skills that you're learning now will be utilized in many different capacities. And so,
And I'll interject there. Let's remember to have you put that up, the information on that lecture you're going to give
oh,
regarding at the end.
you know, okay, well, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
But you know, as many of you are here, you probably have started to see how enriching this field is, right? And so on any given day, I'm dealing with these topics of like just the design artistry of what we're doing, you know, science, or dealing with the mechanical engineers or the plumbing engineers, you know, looking at history, precedent, looking at legal issues, looking at health issues, looking at code life safety. You know, we talked a little bit about accessibility. So looking at all those complexities and how that all informs a design. So it's just such a fun profession because you have all these problems that you're looking at. I just wanted to kind of list these at the bottom because I think these are very important trending topics in the industry right now. Justice in the built environment. We had some colleagues at work that just came back from the NOMA conference, and we were having a discussion about this topic. And you know, what does it mean to have a safe space or safe spaces? How do you engage stakeholders, and how do they feel that they have an impact on the shaping of those environments? In addition, sustainability, net zero, carbon design, really important. This is something you're going to have to deal with. You should be dealing with that now, you know, and just in educating yourselves about these topics, because they're not going to go away. They really are the vocabulary that we have to all learn and really grow and push for. And then resilient design, and that means having buildings adapt to crises, and also how do we make them multi-purpose, and how do we leverage architecture and design? Maybe one day it's an office use, the next day it could be an emergency shelter. So how do we accommodate that? And some cities are starting to, some jurisdictions are pushing for, what is your response to flood mitigation? So we are now having to employ strategies. So coastal projects have to deal with that. And it's also informed by FEMA maps as well. In addition to that, healthy buildings, right? So what materials are we putting into our buildings? And there's just a multitude of sector choices. So I would say right now, in this stage in your career, look at this landscape and what speaks to you, you know, because when I got out of school, I had no clue. I was just like, I'll just kind of apply randomly. But really, I think, you know, you can take a different approach and be more strategic and say, you know, like, for example, later I learned, oh, okay, well, this person, they're at this firm that does performing arts because they had a background in it. They had a family member who was you know, they were in the industry, or they just really enjoyed that. So I would say, if you're going to dedicate a lot of energy into whatever you're doing, like, be a little more selective. And it's okay as you go on your journey to say, like, you know what, I want to switch. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to try this other thing, and go on that learning journey. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. William, do you want to say anything about this or sing? Because I know you guys are, you know, we do a lot of these projects.
I think one interesting perspective. So, like, I work in the retail. Also, Ruben, thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it. It's nice to meet you virtually. But I work in the retail studio of placemaking, and I think what's interesting about retail, like when I was in school, I wanted to do residential and museums, like these really interesting typologies that relate directly with specific clients. And I got into a retail studio, and I did not know what that meant at all. I was, what is retail? Why is retail? Retail, I thought, was a dying typology. It's like not something that people do really anymore. I mean, I shop on Amazon. I'm not going to stores, but retail really is this glue that exists between all of these other typologies, like office and residential and all of that kind of stuff. And I've been working in retail now for about 4-ish years, and I love it. It's really, really interesting. But I didn't know that coming into it. So like Carlos was saying, like I've kind of fallen into this typology, and now that I'm here, I'm really enjoying it. But there's so many different typologies, so many ways to look at buildings and architecture, and specializing is great, especially like towards the end of the career, it seems like. But in the beginning, like look around, date around, see what's happening. Like it's a very interesting place.
Yeah, I think what is cool is that you can be selective. You can start to narrow down. And conversely, you can just say, like, you know what, I'm gonna try different things. So whatever that approach is, I just hope that you have a little bit of intention with it. And then, like, if you decide it's not for you, there's plenty of choices. So I did want to talk a little bit about our office. So this is RDC.
There is one question really quick, Carlos.
Okay, go for it.
Someone has a question.
Yeah. Back to sorry, just going back to the slide like you showed before. Like I know you have a lot of these options here. Well, a lot of these particular options that do connect with each other. What I'm wondering is when you said you can switch it up for something that either differently or similarly, just going based off your experience, I'm just gonna ask you based off of experience. When you're trying to change your sectors, like change your sector choices, is it ideal to go for something you're already used to? Or if you want to try something new, you want to go for something different? Like for residential, you would go for, say, sports, something completely different. Or would you go for something similar to that? Like, I don't know, maybe like healthcare, I guess. I don't know if that would connect to it, but I'm just wondering.
No, that's an excellent question. Because I think there's something strategic and smart about saying, like, okay, there's something familiar about schools, K through 12, for me to go into like higher academic, or and maybe in the higher academic, maybe they do some like academic housing. So then that becomes like your connection for multifamily. So all of these things, they could connect. I'll just personally, for me, I was in an office where I did libraries I did probably like 20 libraries. And so it was a very I understood that typology. It was a lot of fun. I did public libraries, academic libraries. We did one for LACCD. So, and they all were different. So there was like richness in specializing. And then I just decided, you know what? I want to reboot. I want to try something totally different. And it was a little scary, to be honest. It was like, okay, let me try this other office and let's see. You do have to listen to your inner voice about that. And sometimes it can be a little scary, but it can also be like exhilarating. And so I don't regret that. I don't regret changing my course. And as you progress in this field, you also have to start to pay attention to what's happening in different sectors. And you do have to see there are rhythms, like there are different funding sources for universities. So sometimes things cool down. Sometimes there's big bond measures that happen, and then sometimes that money fizzles out. So you do have to start to think a little bit about that. Like, where do you see yourself, like maybe in 10 years or 20 years? Where's the field going? What kind of projects excite me? Is sustainability a core belief that I have? And so those things like will start to pare down the options, because yes, right now there's too many choices here. But what I would advise you is also, like, you're in school right now is your time to explore these typologies, to test, to do competitions. If you're not getting this in your specific studio, find a competition, and like maybe it's a performing arts competition, and play around with that. So you have to kind of take charge of like your development. So hopefully that answers that question, Max. Okay.
And can I jump in on one little thing on that? I think
Yeah.
to your question, Max, there are times where you wouldn't necessarily see how some typologies have overlaps that are weird or new. Case in point, retail is one thing, but all of a sudden the stadium experience is a big thing now. And so stadiums are no longer just coming to watch a football game, but now you have hospitality and luxury booths, which you never had before. And you have retail where you're selling merchandise. So you think you're doing retail and I could never get into stadiums, but actually now it's a component of a stadium. So there are overlaps that either may not have existed or you just didn't think about. So those also are a benefit that can help you do those bridge and make what appear to be 180-degree turns that really aren't.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. Because yes, for me to get hired at another office and to convince them that, hey, I haven't worked on your projects, but I had worked on parts of those typologies. So I wasn't a full expert in those things, but it was enough that I could articulate, hey, I have all this experience with buildings and I can, there's things that I can learn and grow with you. So you just have to be honest about that, and tell people where you are in your journey and why you're really interested in developing a new skill set.
Yeah, and I wanted to add a little bit, and then I really like what Professor Jacob just mentioned. One type you might think it's not correlate to the other type, but later on, when you touch at the different typology, you might have something you can echo back. A quick experience, like when I was in school, and then I start intern from second year when I started in a college. At that time, I was doing cemetery and then a lot of institution work. And then to me, I keep on thinking, oh, because personally, I just like to resolve complicated projects. And then I've heard the courthouse and the airport might be more complicated because there's, a lot of circulation, just as you can imagine. And then when I start at the work full-time job, and then I actually start working on hotels. And then to my kind of a surprise, hotels are actually pretty complicated. So it has the complexity of, giving me the time and the brain work to resolve problem every day, because you need to go through different level and different channel with different group. And then to my point is when that change happened, because, like I couldn't choose what I want because I graduated from the time during recession. So the change was not what I can drive, but from the typology of change, I feel like when you get into a new type, you're like a baby again, right? There's a lot of things you absorb. But once you start working a little bit and you're like, oh, maybe something I worked when I was doing, cemetery and the metro lines, and it correlates back to the hotel. And then later on down the years, there's just the accident opportunity and I get to work on movie theaters. So within a month, because it's a special type, movie theater is a really specialized professional type. Because the client was so demanding, and I ended up have to be laying out a movie theater layout, 4 different layout in a day. To me, the thing is, once I figured there's something your previous experience has, and then it drive back and make it faster for you to learn on the next typology. And then the other thing, what I find out is sometimes I think, okay, maybe I would like this type because I haven't touched that, right? But after a while, when you're really doing it, it might give you a different feeling. So back to, previously Carlos mentioned, William mentioned date around, like Professor Jacob mentioned, sometimes you will find the common sense in the middle, but it's good to open your mind and then try at least starting one part. And from that will get you to another springboard.
Yeah, that's really amazing insight. Thank you, Sang. I will ask a trick question to the audience, and feel free to write your answer in the chat. But what is a courthouse and what is let's call it a hotel experience have in common? So feel free to write your response in the chat. There are some commonalities, even though these are 2 very different typologies. Let's see if anyone can get the answer there. But okay, So moving on with this, I just want to talk a little bit about our office. The office has been around for about 43 years. And I would say so I started working at this office 10 years ago, and it feels like it's evolved in like multiple steps since I joined. So I think that is exciting. Also, when an office can grow and change and adapt, and the work is different, and you bring in talent, and the talent really takes the firm in a very different direction, or maybe you build on what you're doing and you do it at a very high level. So I think it's really exciting. I'm really excited by this office. And I would say that that's kind of a healthy sign for you to be excited about the place that you work at. It could be because you're working with the talent around you. It could be the projects are just really like exciting and amazing. Or maybe it's an opportunity to work with a client that is just like, wow, this is just like really cool. So you can see some of the typologies here that we do, and William, Singh, Jack, Joanna, feel free to just chime in on any of this. But we have a variety of sectors that we work in, and they're very tailored to each client. So you don't have a very repetitive approach or result. So I don't know if you guys want to say anything more about this.
I have one thing to say about just staff and people in general. So like design is one very small part of a much bigger process, making architecture get built. But in those phases, kind of those early phases, we all have different backgrounds and biases and all kinds of things that we bring to the table when we're on a design team and building things and making things. And as an office changes over time, it doesn't change because like the principles change. Like it's not really like a top-down change. It's usually a bottom-up change. It's the individuals that are working on the projects that begin to direct the culture. And I think a lot of people come into offices thinking, I'm going to learn so much. Like I need to grow. I need to kind of learn as much as I can. But you kind of forget that you are a voice that's now adding to the music of the office, if it's look at it from a musical perspective. And the more you can add, the better, and the kind of the more diverse you make the office culture change. So like, don't be scared of speaking up and changing things and saying things should be different and all that kind of stuff. It's welcomed.
Absolutely, and we'll talk a little bit more about the programs that we have in our office. But this is just to give you a potpourri of like different project types that we do. And we also have another studio, Studio 111, that was founded by Alan Pullman, and the approach in this studio is that you can look at a project, and irrespective of the typology, how can we, either through urban design, landscape, or architecture, or just other ways, how can we improve communities? So it's looking at design from a very different lens, and that social impact can take many forms. So it is exciting, because then you can work with different client types, different scales of projects. It could be a very small bus shelter, or it could be a ginormous building. But the root question is, how are we improving that community? And some of the things that I talked about earlier about involving the stakeholders and making that more vibrant, or revitalizing communities that maybe have gone into decline, or maybe the investment has not been there, but different jurisdictions or policymakers are saying like, hey, we really need to repair these communities, or there's many reasons for it, but at the end of the day, you can work in different typologies. So I just did want to point out that we have been playing around also with and I'll kind of come into this next slide, and there's a lot going on here. But that's on purpose, because this is like what we see every day in my office. It's like, okay, if something's happening in this studio, or someone's working on urban design, someone's working on a pro bono program project, or someone's doing peer review. And so I get questions from different people about like, hey Carlos, like how do we solve this detail? Or hey Carlos, there's this issue with like transitions. Like I don't know how to navigate this issue with this condition. So we have explored modular construction in housing, and the trick is like, how do you not make it look like modular construction, and how do you create an experience? So this building, this image is tiny here, but and this just one, it got recognized, got some AIA awards. But it's a modular construction that I believe. I don't recall the total number of units. It's 3 stories. And we work with a fabricator who brought these offsite, and it's very much like Legos. It's really cool how they bring them in, and so very quickly you see the building like happen before your eyes. So a lot of interesting problems with that specific construction technology. I did also want to just talk a little bit about this. Some firms may participate in this and others may not, but there is a 1% pro bono program that the AIA recognizes, and it's the idea of giving back to communities. So maybe you're working with a nonprofit and you're doing pro bono work. This happened to be a project that was dealing with women who were experiencing abuse, and so this was a very much a safe space. So you can have a very beautiful sensitive design and architecture, and and you can make it look very beautiful and grand. So again, this is why I believe in this office, because we do things like this. And we also do grocery stores, and there are some that we've done that are really beautiful, and they're really inviting and welcoming, and the community loves them. And seeing, I think you worked on this project, this was the Del Mar, and that was kind of like a fun project because it became very much a curatorial experience. Maybe you could just quickly talk about that.
Yeah, so this project, well, essentially it's a food hall. And then, so basically, like typically you will see the food hall, food court is you have a shopping center, and then in the middle you have like a 10, 20 different tenants, and then you can grab a taco, get ice cream. But this project, instead of each one like a, airport, you get a counter, we have a huge overarching building. And then inside that building is on the 2nd level of that whole complex. Inside that huge building, very tall ceiling, there are 11 full service restaurants inside. And then there's no ceiling, no walls in between each guys. So now everybody's kind of under one roof, and you get a Thai food, you get a pastry, you get a brewery, and you get different like a Mexican food, and they're all congruent together, which is fun. Is now it's like, you have a lot of kindergarten kids, they're all running around, but how do you put them together harmoniously? So a lot of our work, there's a lot of custom design. And then instead of just hosting all the 11 restaurants together, and now we're thinking, oh, maybe the ceiling, because there's no ceiling per se, it's a canvas for the base shell architect, which is us. And so the client itself, they're really wanting to celebrate because it's close to San Diego, like the local, the maritime culture. So we use all the boat buoys, a lot of rope installation art, and with the mural artist, and then with each different culture of a restaurant, collect together, procured with like the oars. The door of the bathroom is made of the real, like the weathered wood. And then we use like those pipe, kind of like a plumbing pipe serve as a feature light. So everything, you have a soul to connect your projects together, right? Like in the school nowadays, people are gonna ask you, teacher is gonna ask you, what is your partie? What is your concept? And again, this is putting into practice. And we do have a concept, and we take that as our center line and ground, and then we celebrate all different cultures. So this is a great example of how you combine different things together with the varieties, and then giving out, celebrating different type of stages and put different things together. And also it's a place for people to have fun.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. I would encourage you all to go visit it. It's in Del Mar.
The food is good as well.
And so we also do a lot of fun things.
What's the name of that place? What's it
It's
called?
called a Sky Deck. The whole shopping center, it's called Del Mar Highland Town Center in San Diego. And then I think if you pass like the 5, it's really close to that Myanmar, the military base as well.
Thank you, Sing. And I'll call on William again to talk about this. But I just want to preface that in addition to doing the work, right, you also have to keep your mind engaged and see how we can do fun things and engage other partners. So I'll William, why don't you talk a little bit about what this was?
Yeah, definitely happy to. So just a little background. So I'm obviously very biased. I come from Woodbury, and Woodbury's culture is very maker oriented. If you guys are thinking about going to Woodbury, it's an incredible school. And what's interesting and different about it is all of the studios surround the maker space. So they've got 3D printers, laser cutters, and all that kind of stuff. CNC machines, all those different things. And I'm a maker at heart. I'm always loving to make things. And I think there's a kind of a disconnect in the early years of architecture where you're asked to draw a line or create poche or any of these kind of things, and you don't necessarily know what's happening inside of those drawings. And the best way to understand every detail of that, or not every detail, but kind of the important details, is to literally make stuff and see what you can make and see how things go together. What is the detail that you're drawing? What happens between the exterior and the interior wall? So our office thankfully has a lot of digital fabrication tools, which not a lot of offices do have. So we'd like to leverage that and elevate our kind of staff experience in making as well, by having different competitions. So this past year we did a plywood competition where we questioned what is plywood flat pack furniture. So things like IKEA. Typically it's kind of off the shelf. It's made of particle board. It's not the best quality, probably kind of break at some point in its life. Can we play with the concept of building more heritage oriented and kind of longer lifespanning furniture? So we did a plywood competition in the office, and we're hoping to do more of these competitions just to kind of reinvigorate the staff.
Yeah, and then we do an event and we have a party. So you can see actually, William, you had invited some of your students, right? So
yeah. So I mean, and also like it's a small community. This especially in Southern California, like it's such a small community. Everyone knows everyone. We want to connect as much as we can with all these different cultures. So we had a locally funded party. We had, what was it? Kombucha. I think kombucha was provided. So everyone had a bunch of spiked kombucha. And we just drank and talked about architecture and furniture design for like 2 hours. It was great. And you guys are always welcome whenever we do these events. Please come down.
Yeah, for sure. I think that upcoming event is going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you all come. And I just want to talk a little bit about career pathway. So this is specific to our office, but there are many trajectories, or I mean, this kind of says choose. What does your career path look like? Choose your own adventure. And you might decide, you know what, I want to be more of technical, or I want to be more on the design side. And then maybe later you're like, I want to fuse those two things. I want to explore design, but also how do you like William's talking about is like, how do you build it? How do you articulate it? And how do you make it beautiful and deliberate? As opposed to maybe relying on a process of let me describe the vision, and then let me rely on the craftspeople to execute that. So there's a little bit of translation that happens in that process. So anyways, talking more about your career trajectory, you should design your career as well, and don't think that it's just like, oh, okay, I'm going to be in this office for like 30 years and eventually I'll get to this level. It's like, doesn't quite work that way. You have to along the way set goals for yourself, and then and it's okay to tell an office, hey, I am leaning more towards project management. I am really good with clients. I'm really good at leveraging human resources and getting people motivated. I'm a great orchestrator in that process. Hey, if that's your strength and you discover that, you're going to be really valuable. But equally, if you're like, hey, I love details, I love how buildings come together, and there's just a never-ending set of like issues with sustainability, accessibility, code, because all this stuff keeps changing, right? So it's like you never fully master it. You're just gonna keep like growing with it. And if that's your thing, it's like, okay, cool. Well, I'm gonna go down the technical path. So that's what's fun about this profession, is you don't quite have to figure it all out. If you do have a strong sense about it, I would say also find mentors and get their knowledge and their feedback, and ask them, like, what has your experience been? And then this goes back to the idea of like interviewing the place you're going to work at. It doesn't just go one way. So be deliberate about that. I don't know if Jack or Singh, if you have any other insight into.
I think to Carlos' point, I think it's a little immature, but sometimes I think about being an architect or being in this field. It's almost like being a chef in the cooking field. The reason is because we all started somewhere, whether it's like we like cooking food or we like tasting food. That's how we started, and then maybe each of us has something that we really like. For example, if you really like fish, then you go and become a sushi chef, maybe. And then if you really like fast food, like burgers and stuff, fast food, and then you go and become a fast food cooker. So I think the idea behind this is that I think we all want to explore like the material or the ingredients that we like, whether it's meat or fish or vegetable, and then we perfect this the method or the technique or the skill to cook it. I think in architecture is almost similar. Like as we mentioned earlier, we talked about all those different typologies of buildings, but in the essentially they all are made out of either concrete, type 1 buildings, or metal, type 2, or wood, type 3, right? They all have the similar ingredients in them. It just depends how you cook them, or how you like to, prepare the food, or how you like to design the buildings. But I think they all are connected. So if you let's say if you work in the healthcare for some times, and then you switch to being a architect in like a retail, I think that the skills you learn there, the communication, the coordination skill, you can still use it. And then I think I don't think in the start you should really think too far about which career path. I think you should kind of enjoy architecture a little bit, for a couple of years, explore the projects, explore different typologies. I think, for me, I think that was the pathway that I took. At least for the first 4 years up to this point, I've worked in 4 different firms. And for me, it was a journey to really explore what kind of project I like. So I worked in a residential firm, and then I worked in a industrial firm, and then also healthcare, and then now placemaking. And during this journey, I found that I really enjoy, residential and retail. So I told myself, why not mix them together and work in a mixed use, studio. That's why I joined RDC, and I think that's what I told I think Derek, when I during the interview, I said, I was just doing like really small projects in the beginning, but I think those projects were really important for me to understand, if I really enjoy doing them, or if that's the stuff I really want to do for the next, 10, 20, 30, or even 40 years. I think architecture, I don't know, like for me, all the principals that I met, they never retire. They're like 60, 70-year old, and they continue. Like I could tell you, like there was one principal, he retired and he still comes to the office. So I mean, it's funny. I could joke about it now, but maybe it's inappropriate. But we always, kind of he likes to do architecture. He likes to design, so we give him design, but he builds it to the marketing hours. Right, so it's not buildable to the project. So he likes it. So we kind of joke around about it. But I think all the people that I met are so far really really have taught me a lot of stuff. I think everyone is a mentor to me, like saying she QC the heck out of me every time. But it's good. Like I mean, it's just to make sure that there's no error, and it's always good to have someone look behind your back. I think that's that's what a team is. Yeah, I don't know.
That's an excellent point. So in our office, you develop a set of drawings, and it's not like you're done. Someone else has to look at the work that you've done, and it's for the purpose of like, okay, we're a team. We're going to cover each other. Maybe this person is really good at code analysis, and so like let's have them look at that. So there's there are many chefs at play, right? Maybe there could be a lead designer that's got that vision and that like artistic eye, but there are many hands that prepare that meal, and so along that way, we just want to make sure that we're doing a great job at it, and we want to make sure that the client's happy, and so we check each other's work. So that's what Jack was describing as QCing his work, quality checks.
Yeah.
Sadie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to add, I think, one thing Jack mentioned, because it seems like four of us were promoting RDC the whole night. So sometimes, the thing is there's different practices, right? And sometimes you get to work for a star architect, we call it, like those world famous one-off architect. And this particular architect, even if he or she is 90 years old or 40 years old, you're not going to get to pick a carpet color, because definitely that person is the one to say. And then you learn a lot from, why he or she get this cute sense of putting this together, or why it's this form, not that form. Another type of practice is more like this one-man team. Like, for example, I have my graduate classmate, and when he graduated and he just started his own business, and he does not have a client actually, and he has not done a set of construction documentation himself. But then, like he's just a wolf type, like I'm not gonna work with anybody. And he started his own type. The other one is like a font studio. Basically, it happens a lot in Southern California, usually the size ranging from 4 to 10. So you have this family-oriented type. You work really close with everybody. And then like all the rows where the colors printed out here, all the ladders, you might just rounding like 3 of those levels all at the same time when you start the job. The other type is more like a corporate. So for example, like our office, but any of the type, what's more important for us, for everybody here, is, trying to find the support that you need, the nexus. Because I'm pretty sure in different practices, different groups, there are people wanting to help. That's the beauty of the architecture industry, because it has been going on for 100 years. There's apprenticeship, there's a mentorship. There's just this kind of like the spirit coming from ancient time. People wanted to help and pass knowledge to the next generation. Because certain times, you might not get lucky. Like our office, we have a pretty good culture. where you already heard all the promotion talking about our office. But certain time, if like say for example, you don't know ahead of time, you start your work, maybe the culture or something, it's not aligned with you. And again, don't let that back you off or kind of like talk you down. You're good. You have your place and, kind of capability to shine and trying to find your support. There's always going to be support around. So I would just want to make sure everybody understand there's different typology, different parts. But either way, this career path, like you wanted to be a star architect yourself, you want to be a company leader, you wanted to, okay, I just want to day in and day out do my 8 hours job. I want to draw the same bathroom for the next 10 years. That's totally fine. But either way, there's always a point where you find your comfortable point. It takes years, maybe, or it takes maybe several months. You find your ideal dream job. But either way, trying to find the support that you need, and there's always going to be support.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful advice.
And I'll just interject, in the chat, there were some answers to the question of similarities to courthouses and hotel lobbies.
Okay.
One person wrote they both elicit targeted psychological responses from the users with their structure, plan, and circulation.
Yes, that's very insightful.
Someone else wrote courthouses and hotel lobbies, hallways, they both give the opportunity to allow public gatherings to users, give the people to network in some sort of way. They are both used in different ways, but the programming of the buildings are designed differently.
Yes, that's a wonderful response. Like I said at the beginning, there's no right or wrong to this, and I think some of you are making some really wonderful connections. I'll just share it to you from personal experience. I went to for 1 year, I took like a sabbatical from one office, and I just wanted to go explore another thing. Somehow I ended up working on a prison project. So that was like, again, I'm the guy with library projects, and now I'm working on a prison project. But it actually was really interesting as a project because it had all those security issues of how do you approach the building. It also happened to be a historic building. And so what I learned from that whole process was like there's a sequence of how you experience the building. And so that, we were pursuing a courthouse project, which was kind of the end goal there. But then I started to see the connection of like, okay, so courthouses are actually 3 buildings in one. There's like the approach for the judges. There's the approach for maybe someone who's coming in, from prison, and then there's the approach to the public, right? And so like there's different security levels, and it's one building, one shared experience, but it's different. Similarly with hotels, right? There's like a different sequence into that experience. So I definitely think that just like Professor Jacob said earlier, you can find those connections. You can make those connections, and that's how you can find yourself in a very different environment and still be able to solve problems. So I'm encouraged by everyone's creativity here. Okay. And with that, Professor Jacobs, how much more time do we have? Because I barely scratched the surface on this, but I think it's so cool that we had, I had some participants from the office. So
yeah, well, we're at 7:20, but we've got time to linger in a little longer, and those that have to leave around 7:30, go ahead and do so. But I think we'll keep rolling till about 7:45, something like that. So we've got 25 minutes easy.
So I think this next topic is very important. It's a very trending topic. And I'll be honest, as architects, we're always learning. We're never quite like William said, we never fully master something. But we do learn it. We learn, and we learn quickly. And then before you know it, you're the expert in the room. And our role is one where we do have to be more of like what would you say, like a conductor. where you do have to bring all these disciplines together. So having these great communication skills is critical. But getting back to this topic, architecture. So how many students are learning about sustainability? Like how much of this is an emphasis for your studies currently? And feel free to just kind of chime in on the chat and or who's interested in sustainability, or who is like, okay, that's kind of my next class, or I need to, feel free to just kind of provide your input on the chat. The reason this is very important is because, the scientific community has basically flagged that, through the activities of development, we're having, essentially our planet is heating up, right? And so we are basically trying to mitigate the disastrous impacts of that outcome. So, there's been a lot of buy-in from the international community to do something about this. There's a correlation between population increase, energy consumption, and the emissions that are generated from all of that activity. In addition, you have to build more, right? There's more people, there's more floor area. But it creates this cycle of like, it could be like a train that's like, it's not going to slow down, right? So we're basically at that stage where we recognize the correlation and that we have to do something to minimize that impact. Now, with this growth in floor area, that is good for us, right? Like it keeps us in business, like there's something to do. But as professionals with a conscience, we basically say, okay, we're gonna try to keep up with that demand, but we have to do it in a very responsible way. So, and let me kind of move on. The key insight is, and this was published by Architecture 2030. So I encourage you all to go visit this link. It's full of information. But the big insight is that, okay, like a lot of the carbon CO2 emissions are generated by activities in the built environment. So, if you're going to continue on in this field, that means like, well, you have to take some responsibility for this. You can't just design irresponsibly. That's kind of the idea under all of it. And so, like, well, what does this mean, right? I mean, so the emissions, the greenhouse emissions, they come from different places. They could be by sector, residential, commercial, or it could be, maybe it's the production of materials. So these are some of the major contributors because they're high energy. They just require a lot of intensity in their production, in their shipping. You can kind of see like this idea here in their shipping and then their eventual construction, and then they stay in the environment, and then eventually they get renovated again. So we need to start to think about buildings as like, and this is the concept here that we're moving into, is what the life cycle is of materials, and we definitely want to maximize their lifespan so that they minimize the impact on the environment. And so AIA 2030 established a commitment to track progress on this journey to net zero. And so there's two concepts here. There's embodied carbon, and that's the emissions associated with materials and the construction process and the whole life cycle of a building. So it's the making of the material, it going into the building, and then what happens after you no longer use that material? Do you demolish it, or do you, like, it goes to landfill, or do you repurpose it? Or is there a way to transform that material into something else? We just kicked off a project, residential project, I think about 75 units. And the scope of the project is to demo windows, demo doors, to do some modest updates. It's a very modest project, but in thinking about this, we started talking about, can we just take those windows and like donate them somewhere? Like they don't have to go to a landfill. And so, that does prompt that there are other industry partners out there that will take those materials and they will, so like Habitat for Humanity, they have a restore program and you can donate your, materials. So we have to be really creative about these processes and don't just think about, like the client's going to love that. They're going to love that idea of like, oh, okay, someone's going to take these windows and they're going to be useful somewhere else. Or maybe there's a community that could benefit from that. So making these connections makes you more valuable. And this diagram is more, again, talking about that idea of whole life vision, right? So we should be asking these questions. Where was the material made? And what will happen with it when we're done? And then these are some design strategies to get you to think about this. And so I invite you to, again, this was published through the AIA. There's this separate group called the Carbon Leadership Forum, so look them up. And so they published this embodied carbon guide. The first part talks, it's more about educating you about what it is and what the impacts are. This third part to me is more interesting because it talks about the strategies. So, this is a little more tangible for architects. It's like, okay, we can do these things. So like the reuse and the retrofit of existing buildings, sometimes in the design process or the concept process, a client might ask the question to an architect, hey, I have an existing building, but I have this program or this intended use. So what do you think, architect? Can I keep my existing building and modify it, or should I just demo it and start anew? So these are like, this is where we have to start to be creative with those problems. And William, feel free to chime in on this because this is getting into some strategies. And I know you are involved early on in the ideation of projects. But anyways, this is important. Maybe the strategy is, hey, maybe we reduce floor area, but maybe there's a way to engage exterior outdoor spaces so you have flexibility in your programming. Maybe we can reduce below grade construction because, again, foundations, highly energy intensive, right? So the more you build, the bigger the foundations. And it's like, if you think about it, the amount of money that goes into those foundations is something that you don't ever really see, but it's there and it's going to be there for the life of the building. Thinking about being creative with strategy.
I think it's also like incredibly regional too. Like we build all over the United States, like all different countries, things like that. Like cost of construction is different. Material resources are different. Like in Studio 111, like there's been a lot of shipping container projects that doesn't make sense necessarily in Joshua Tree or in Utah or any place that kind of far away from ports. So thinking about how you're going to source the different materials that make the project as well. Like there's been recently a lot of problem with cement production. So it might make sense to not use cement as much in projects, which pushes us towards more things like mass timber, using wood construction, which ends up being more sustainable in the end. But yeah, it's super complex. There's so many moving parts to it. And it's always changing day by day as market conditions change as well.
And I'll keep moving on, but if you go and check out that AIA, and I'll probably share these links later so that you don't have to like speed copy things. But I think there's also this like other interesting topic about health of materials and material selection. So there's been a lot of research, and there's a trend in the industry to not use certain materials because they've been deemed hazardous. So a lot of offices will go out of their way to align their product selections to not include these materials that may have carcinogenics, or they just cause people get sick, right? Maybe they had benefit at one time because they were easy to work with or they were available, but they're just not good materials. So we've recognized that. And then there's low carbon materials. Maybe you can generate them quickly, or maybe there's more local availability. So we have to look at that. Like this is an interesting product that I just learned about. So it's this wood fiber insulation product. And it comes in different forms. So you can pump it in as insulation, or you can have these they look like interlocking blocks. It's in this capacity, it's called timber board, but it can become like an insulation that you can slip into your walls. So definitely a lot of interesting innovation in materials. This particular website called Healthy Materials Lab, it's starting to think of this like a nutrition label. So it starts to describe the disclosures from the manufacturers, that as to what those ingredients are in the makeup of the materials. So it's very important to think about that. We discussed this already. This is the material salvage aspect. So this is the restore. Okay, so this is I'm just gonna quickly talk about this. Is this the AIA 2030, the DDX, which is it's like a database. Companies sign up for this, and they basically say that we're gonna start to track the energy use in our buildings. There could be different types. So we have some housing projects here. We have some stores. It's kind of it doesn't really matter what the project is. The idea is you want to input it, you want to define its square footage, and then you get a baseline for the energy use. Like how much energy are you going to be using in that building? And then you start to plug in okay, there's certain optimization with either because of the code or because hey, I'm using these types of mechanical systems or electrical systems. I'm using electrified systems. And so the goal is really to get this your energy use as low as possible. And so the unit of measure is this thing, it's called energy use intensity. So lower is better. And ultimately this just it helps clients to understand that they're saving money, So these strategies translate into savings. This diagram I thought was interesting because it just talks about the different stages of, for example, there's the upfront carbon is like the construction, and then there's the operational carbon, which is the life of the project. So maybe after we're gone, after we've built the project, the client is living with that. And so it just talks about all the different players involved and what their influence is when. So definitely for architects, it's okay, when we're building the building or designing it, we have a lot of input into that. So that's our time to really articulate a lot of these goals. I don't know if you have also looked at the USGBC, but they have a lot of, they're aligned with a lot of these values, and they have a rating system which also aligns with different areas related to transportation, sustainable sites, water efficiency, water use, energy and atmosphere, and materials and resources.
I'll interject in there so people know that USGBC is the United States Green Building Council. So
Yes.
You want to kind of look at that, plug into that. And Carlos, we have a dual program that's getting ready to get more robust, because we have the conventional architecture program at El Camino, but we're getting ready. We have an environmental technology program that only has a couple of limited classes, but it's like a certificated program. Well, it's going to become one, and have more classes dedicated to that. So the El Camino students could do a look ahead at that as we're trying to get that program further enhanced. I'm sure it's about a year off, but it's coming.
Yeah, maybe you want to, as students, you want to push for like more materials exploration, or maybe there's like even a testing component to it, and finding partners that can help you test materials. So this is your opportunity. Learn more about it, and then find a way to shape the education programs. But we also in California we have the green building standards. So this can be a little daunting because it is the building code, and there's just a lot to this. I'm not going to lie, but it does align with the USGBC in that okay, we're talking about materials, we're talking about water use, we're talking about energy use. So a lot of this is like you start to see the connections between the building code and these other programs. So with that, I did want to talk a little bit about adaptive reuse if we have time. Am I going to have to do the speed version of this?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do the speed version so we make sure we leave some time for
Okay.
folks.
So this is a project that I worked on in downtown LA. Has anyone been to this one? Just curious if it looks familiar to anyone.
I think I have. Is that the Macy's?
Yes, this was the Macy's Plaza,
Near,
formerly the Broadway Plaza.
right, near Hope and 7th, huh?
Hope, yes, Hope and 7th.
I have not gone to the reinvention of it yet.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a visit. And if you all ever want to go there, we can do an informal talk there, or just like exploration. Sing actually worked on it. She worked on the Sheraton. So there's two towers. There's an office tower, and then this one on the left is the rebranded Sheraton Hotel. So we had to do improvements on that high rise, and there were aspects of refurbishing the lobby, and there was a very high-end restaurant. So really, really cool project. If you can all go check it out. But you can see here the original fabric of this building. It was built originally in the 1970s. So it's very blocky, very defensive, not very inviting from the outside standpoint. But the gesture was really more internalized. So, supposed to give you this idea of being inside of a street. And that was kind of the initial concept of it. Yeah, and just to give you some quick stats. So again, it's in downtown LA. It is a big project. I don't have time to get into too many of the stats there, but the response, the architectural response was really like, how can we make this a little more porous? So one of the big moves is like, let's take the roof off. And in concept, that all sounds simple, right? But there's a million problems with like that you have to solve as a technical architect. So but we also saw like, okay, can we cut the block, right? So can we create these like circulation connections? Can we create an experience from the valet as you drive in so that you feel connected sectionally to other parts? So very interesting project. I mean, there's also a metro station that's like running through the middle of 7th Street. And I don't know if you're all aware, but a lot of these stations, they had knockout panels. So they were designed with the idea that in the future, there could be tie-ins with commercial developments. Now, making the actual connection is not as easy as it sounds, but the potential for that was there. So structurally, the walls would allow for a big opening to be cut into them. And so, this is some of the initial renderings, which gives a vision to that idea of taking the roof off, creating. So you can see here, this red diagram is a doubling of that of opening below. So definitely became more generous. And these are some of the we call them mid-block crossings. So just different ways to get into the project and to cut through the project. This is the hotel side. So you have a porte cochere where you pull in, but really making that more accessible to the public. And so the demolition on this project was like a little, insane. I don't know how else to explain it other than like, insane in a good way. Insane in that the building had to stay open for the duration of this, So it's not like other buildings where you have to shut it down and then you get to do all this work. It's like, no. You have to, people are still going to Macy's. Macy's didn't shut down. The office tower didn't shut down. The hotel didn't shut down. So it's fully operational. And so logistically for the contractor, that was an interesting problem. They had to consider, how can I cut up the project? And also maybe there's a tenant that I have to move first. So we have to like create another space. We have to prepare another area of the building. And so a very interesting problem just from a logistical side of how you approach this. But just in creating that plaza opening, they had to chip out the concrete, and you can see all the rebar, and then you have exposed beams, so you have to cut all of that. And then there's this stage where you see the trusses overhead, and then you slowly start peeling all of that. I thought it was actually really interesting to see the building with just the open truss work. And for a split second, I think we all thought, oh, maybe we should leave it that way. But I think we went back to the vision that it was like, no, it should be an open experience. But there were other things that had to happen to make this a more open project. So we cut these big openings at the corners. This project, these are the spiral ramps for the parking. I don't know if you've ever driven up these. You can get a little dizzy and disoriented because it's just like a continuous spiral. So having these openings actually was a little bit of a breathing relief, like as you go up. And then, we also thought about, okay, maybe we should strip some of the brick to change up the articulation of the massing. We stripped the parking had these like screens that were very it created for a really dark parking experience. So that was an improvement. But we also, started to cut out parts of the building. And so along this journey, I just have to say that it's an adaptive reuse project is going to, there's many unknowns, and you're not going to know all of these things until you're like, okay, they cut the steel and this is what the condition is. So now I have to solve and design, complete the design execution. So it is really interesting just from a problem solving standpoint. So these are some hand sketches that I had to do during construction so that the craftspeople could continue and like, okay, I understand now how I can execute that. We do a lot of mock-ups. So in the design, this is a major investment for the client. So we want to see what the quality of the materials are going to be before they get installed. And we want to see them in place because there's many factors to seeing it in place. The buildings, the towers are they're steel framed, so they have steel columns, steel beams. But in some areas, they had the steel encapsulated in concrete, and that was its fire protection. So we, as a gesture, we wanted to also, in the plaza, we wanted to create this articulation of connecting that visual language of concrete. So we actually shotcreted in the concrete to wrap some of these columns. And so shotcrete is a method of pumping in concrete. So you do like a three-sided form, and then you pump in the concrete. And in this case, we wanted a board form look. So we stamped wood, and it gave that aesthetic result. But you have to do one. so that like, okay, that's what it's going to look like. And then we're going to repeat that many times. And there was also some interesting things about these were the beams that were remnants from the like what you saw before, which is these beams here, right? So there was formerly that was occupied space. Now it's not. So like, what do you do with those conditions? We took the attitude of like, let's express that. Let's celebrate that there was building there. There was steel there. So, you can, in these renderings, you can see that that's expressed. You can see the steel profiles are still visible. So you can find a lot of opportunities in this. And so this is the plaza. The big problem with this is like, okay, you took the roof off. Now you have a plaza, but how do you waterproof it? So that is a big problem, right? And so these images, I wish I could explain in a little more detail. Maybe someday if we talk more about details. But I thought this was a really fun part of the process where we work with Shaw Concrete, and they do this really beautiful architectural concrete. So you can see different stages here. So you have the wire mesh. They do these doweled systems so that the concrete can move and expand. And we had different aggregates. So I don't know if you saw here from the mock-up. Well, where's the mock-up? So there's different colors of the base cement, and then there's also different sizes of the aggregate. Sorry, there's an ambulance going through. And so what they do is they seed that. And so you have like this person who's been doing this for 30 years and is a craftsperson who they know the exact ratio and the density of like that aggregate, and they sprinkle it on. It's just done by hand. And then you have this like army of people that come in, and then they start to smooth it out. And then up here you can see they wet it, and then they come and they grind it, and that is what you then see is you see that remnant of the grinding. So it's really beautiful. So I would encourage you to go and visit it. And we had this like turf area because we wanted that to be a very social space. And so we wanted that to become a playground in effect. And so it was really interesting to see that, just even that system. So after you waterproofed it, you do a little bit of like a slurry mix to create positive drainage. You waterproof it again. And then there is this like padded material that you lay down. I didn't catch a picture of it, but below this, they also put a sand layer. So it helps to dampen movement. And so this is all permeable. It's, we have drains in all of this so that water can be collected. And then we install the turf material, and they tuck it in, and it just looks great. I just wanted to kind of point this out. Anytime we had planters, this is not rainwater. This is an actual testing method. So they hot mop the waterproofing on, and then you flood test it so it stays like that for 24 hours or 48 hours, and then you can see how it performs. And so just a few more images here. We had like for the vertical rails, you can't go later and start to demo the waterproofing. So you do like a fluid applied treatment around structural connections, and then you come in with your like your guard systems, and you attach them to these connections. So you have to think ahead in how to solve those problems. And we had a grand stair feature to invite you into the project. And so I think the renderings kind of show the vision of that. And so what's cool in all this is seeing how they form it. So the stair itself was formed as a slope, and then the steps were built. And I don't have photos of that, but you can see here how they used a hot mop system to create the waterproofing, and then they built the concrete on top of that, in that pretty texture that we liked. And then this image is just like, it was really cool to see this, like one day they come in and they do this like 60-foot, 80-foot boom that they pour concrete onto this deck. And so before they do any concrete pours, usually the contractor will say, hey, architect, can you come out and can you like verify things? And it turned out that they had missed 2 drains. So, but they had done all this rebar work. So again, as an architect, you're like, okay, well, let me try to figure out the details so that I can work with what's there and minimize the impact, because the truck was coming the next day. They didn't really have time to rework a lot of things. So sometimes you have to adapt. It still worked. The details still worked, but I was able to give them something that they could work with. Yeah, and then again, this is another image of them flood testing the roof. And then eventually we added this Ipe material, which is a very dense wood. And if you leave it untreated, it becomes like a silver weathered look. And sometimes there's these really cool things that happen. So like this spider lip that they brought out. And I just thought that was just the coolest thing, because you get to see some of this technology of how you how they build this, right? So the scaffolding was no longer there, and so they had to get up high to install these catenary cables for the lighting system. So and then here's some details on that. So just to explain a little bit of the complexity, the hotel building is technically its own building. The office tower is its own building, and the Macy's part was its own building. So this was built as 3 individual buildings, which means that there's seismic movement and differential between those buildings. So any connection that you do between one building to the next requires anticipating movement. So that's why we had in the catenary cables, we had these like slip connections. So should there be a very big earthquake, the cables are not just going to snap. There's going to be some give in the connections. And then there's a specific load assigned to the cables as well. And then there's all this detailing associated with those conditions. So it may not look like it, but this part up here is stucco. And it was like, so I had to come up with all these details on how do you make it look like concrete. But we had to do that so that, we could integrate some of the detailing associated with the catenary cable. And then the end result you can see here, you can see the different aggregates in the plaza. You can see the grand stair. And so, Professor Jacobs, let me know if we're good on time, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're about to close out. I had a question on the Ipe wood. That's a roof. Was that above the Starbucks?
Yes.
And that's, yeah. So that was something that people are walking on.
That is correct. So we had a this is called, okay, so let's talk a little bit about the details. Whoops. Sorry. So you can see some of the details here. I'm trying to find a good one here. I mean, this one kind of shows you, for the most part, there was a steel angle bounding the entirety of this. And then we had these sleepers. So the sleepers are, like, you can see them here in this photo. They were bolted on. And so that allows you to have, it's like, think of it like a sub deck. So then you can
Right.
bring in your wood, and you can use concealed clips so you don't see fasteners.
You can't zoom in on any of those details, can you? Will it, from your
Um,
vantage point, will it let you?
Let me see if I can. Oh,
And while he's doing that, Abigail, you had a question that was earlier on, if Abigail is with us still.
Yes, sir. It was about mentioning earlier how when you were designing the jail, you had to think about the entrances and how different people entered the facility. I was wondering at what point in the design process did you consider that? Like, did you think about the entrances first and then build your concept around it, or did you come up with a concept first and then
So,
adjust accordingly?
so jails are very much like a kit of parts. So they're governed by the Federal Bureau of Prisons, so it's a federal entity. And so they basically have their standards. So I had to read this 1,000-page thick manual. And it kind of gives you like the kit of parts. So it's like, okay, so you don't have to really reinvent a lot of it. But you can have influence and like, okay, well, they obviously cared about the exterior. So, you could make a suggestion on like, well, can we shift the door, locate it here? But for the most part, it's like, it's more of a kit of parts. Like there were different sized blocks that you could use, like CMU blocks. I just kind of asked the contractor, hey, can we just use one size block? And they loved that idea because it was like, okay, yeah, we only have to buy one, one type. And sometimes like in the kit of parts, it's like, okay, yeah, like a cell is like, it's this thick. And by the way, what you see in the movies about people breaking through ducts, it's like, no, that doesn't happen. Like a lot of the openings where ducts go through, you have to weld in like rebar. So there's like, and it's in the same spacing. So it's like, even if you cut through the duct, you're like, oh, okay, I can't go past this. But the issues of prisons are like visibility and safety for the guards. So you can have like multiple wings, but there's very specific sight lines. So it's very much like theaters also, performing arts. You have to hit certain sight lines to, if you're in the upper seats. So this is where all this stuff connects, You're just like, oh, I didn't know that these two things connected, but yeah. So okay, so let's go back to this. By the way, there's just a quick joke with the prisons. It's like they, the Federal Bureau of Prison staff, they're like the sweetest people, and but they all say like, we're lifers. Like prisoners can come and go, but they're lifers. So that was their point of view, which I thought, well, that's funny.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
go for it.
Yep, I see that. Yeah, I was just giving students an opportunity to see some of the detailing up close and how things come together.
Yeah, so I mean, this was kind of a fun little detail. So this was one of the edges, and so like I said, let me see if I can make it a little bigger too. So we have these perimeter angles, and these are what you see going in this direction are the sleepers, and then you can see the wood decking. But you do have to think about like I got a question during construction, like, well, because of the details in the drawings didn't really specify. But where do you want a joint? And then that got me into thinking about, oh, that's a really great question. And you have to design that, you have to really think about that. And then also, what is the mix of the wood colors? Because, you want to give them some guidance. And it's a little like, that's what this is right here, is we work with the craftsperson and we said, we want this kind of like density of look. Like we could have said, hey, we want all lights and then all midtones and then all darks. And then like, let's repeat that pattern. That could have been an ABC pattern, or it could have been ABB, whatever, right? That's design. So simple questions like, where do you want that joint, introduces a lot of these layers of thinking. And sometimes it's really hard to like solve all of that in the documentation phase, but you will have to deal with it in construction. So I would encourage all of you, like, don't be afraid of getting into construction. You're going to learn so much in that process. We utilize this a rain chain. So the idea with that is that as water, this is kind of like open joint wood. So water, so you have like a level deck, right? So the deck isn't itself sloping. But then as water ponds and collects here, then it doesn't pond. That's sorry, poor choice of words. We don't want it to pond. But as water flows here, then it goes down these chains. So it becomes a detail, something you celebrate. So don't think of there's always an opportunity to make something an experience.
That's a really good point. Really good point there. Well, it is it is 8 o'clock. I don't want to keep people too much longer, making them feel like they have to stay engaged, but it has been a great conversation. Is there any other slides, Carlos, you wanted to maybe rifle through before you
see.
closed out?
I will share this with you because this was just another one of those, like, no one could really anticipate the complexity of these things. In concept, you say like, okay, here's the metro station, here's our project, and here's a connection that we have to make between these two. And so from the design standpoint, you want to envision beautiful spaces, right? Like, how do you make this a good experience? But in this, actually, if you think about it, it becomes a tunneling project. And it's certainly something I had never really done before. So you're always learning, but this, because we had to create that tunnel, the contractor, basically they had to core in all these pipes and inject concrete to essentially create like a lid that they could then go in and start to excavate. So there's a good like chunk of time where they were just building this tunnel. Like, that's what the actual making of the spaces was like the easy part. It was just this part was really was the challenge, right? So but that's the journey that you go on. You're always learning.
And that tunnel is, people still use that, or that was just the access to do the building?
Yeah, so that's so the metro station and the building development, that's where they meet. So we had to design. Actually, I think the metro side, they took care of building part of that tunnel. It does like that. This part required a lot of coordination, going down to meet with the metro agencies. Like, we had to get all these clearances. We had to do all the safety training. We had to walk with them and kind of like understand how they're, there's like, it was interesting to learn. So like with a lot of these metro stations, because of the pressure changes, so when the trains come in, there's like a huge displacement of air. So there has to be there's like a countering system that like pressurizes. Otherwise you're gonna, like, people are gonna, you're gonna run out of oxygen if you're down there. So there's all this engineering that also goes into these stations. And so we had to kind of like understand some of those variables. It didn't really impact us because we had, we're kind of like, if you think about it, we're like an open valve here. So when they pressurize, it kind of all dissipates. So it worked. But that was interesting. It became more of a means and methods, or meaning a problem for the contractor, but we had to kind of see how that played out. So that's the fun part of construction.
Excellent. That's a good thing. I'm glad you made that those aspects of presentation, because so often our presentations are of the pretty and finished side. I think our students don't see the interest and joy you can get out of being the under construction aspect of the project, and we try and explain it, and you guys did a really good job illustrating that. Some examples of what you encounter, but how that could be quite rewarding as well.
Yeah,
So
it's oh, sorry, go ahead,
no,
Professor.
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that you know, like I find joy in that. It's like, oh, okay, like the contractor says, like they don't know how to solve this detail. It's like, okay, let me do it. Let me, you know, let me brainstorm on that. In fact, I kind of like I joke with people in the office, like, don't give me the easy projects, give me the hard ones, give me the ones that are, you know, no one can figure out. Those are the ones that I thrive in because it's really about if you're gonna take time and detail a project like let's really get to the essence of how you what are the issues, what are the problems, you know, what are the connections, what are the opportunities of expressing, what are the limits with the craftsperson. And so sometimes in construction I like to pull in the person who's welding them. Some of those details I had to kind of walk with them and tell them, hey, I know you want me to figure this out, but can you give me a little bit of insight, like what will make it easier for you? And so some of those details were informed by those conversations. You know, it's not that like we come with this like magical knowledge. It's very much like, okay, let me kind of use the resources that are there. And
Organic and exploratory and informational. You have to get the data. You learn from people, and
yeah,
you learn from tradesmen and craftsmen, and then you figure things out based on what you learn as well. Of course, I came in a little later. I don't know if you explained to people your role at
oh,
RDC, as you and I talked about that
I
a
didn't
little
even talk
bit.
about that. So I'll just thank you everyone for staying on. I think you're troopers. But um I did want to I think we were lucky that we had all those other folks from my office because they all speak to different voices, and you can see how rich it can be in an office. My role, I kind of invented it. You know, I was a project architect for years. I went more down the technical path. Um, but then, you know, an opportunity presented itself in the office to do quality management. I talked to the CEO. You know, hey, can I do this? And he's like, well, okay, yeah, let's talk about that. Um, and then, you know, he had other ideas like, well, can we also do this with the role? And then the role grew and grew. And so the idea of like, okay, I can do technical management, I can do training, you know, and the cool thing about training is that it means that I'm always learning. I'm not just a teacher. I'm like, I have to go off and like learn the stuff. And so it's not like I said, like, oh, you get to this stage and you know it all. It's like, no. It's like 1 hour before you learn it, and then you teach it. But you build the confidence. You build the confidence that, you know what, it's okay, I can do that. Um, you know, I will also do a lot of mentoring in the office, and also with some of my work with the AIA. I do want to get very involved with the student community and find pathways into the profession from that industry side, and help you all build network, because I think that's the most important thing right now for you is to build a network. I put my LinkedIn there. You know, you guys can, you know, friend me and you know, if you have questions, you know, we can have those conversations. I can invite you to some industry events that we have. But that's how
How
this
many
works.
times have they heard that? My students heard that. I've tried. Huh, Abigail? What did Ruben say?
Yeah, I mean that's wisdom there. But it does come from, do you want to be a lone wolf and struggle, or do you want to see the amazing people out there? And I think that's part of the fun of it too. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of it's a crafted role, and I think that's really cool that they let me do that. Um, and I'm still kind of like, I feel like there's still a lot of room for growth in this role. So I get to work with everyone in the office. I get to look at everyone's projects. People come to me and they say, hey, Carlos, how do I detail this? Or I have this code question, or, you know, I have an accessibility problem. Like, how do I deal with this? So sometimes I'll tell you, it's one of the most humbling positions to be in, because sometimes you don't have the answers, but that's okay, because I know where the resources are, and I can reach out to my network and I'm like, okay, I'll get the answer. So you just never say like, I don't know, and that's it. It's like, I don't know, but let me figure out how to get the answer.
And that in itself is a unique position, because so often in offices we're on 2, maybe 3 projects at a time, maybe, often just one. And often you really don't see or know the intricacies of any of the other projects. So
Right.
this is all of a sudden giving you an opportunity to physically touch on most, if not all, of the projects.
That is the fun part of it, but I think the other fulfilling part of it is seeing talent develop and grow and helping me develop processes for them to do that, to be successful. So their success is my success.
And now
Um,
that I know that with networking, I co-teach. One of the other profs had to jump off, but I teach a design studio that is a design build studio.
oh,
Um,
okay.
and so
Fantastic.
now that I've just met Carlos, he's certainly going to be a resource to us as we start to develop that in the spring. I mean,
Oh,
students
fantastic.
are developing their projects.
Yeah.
That you are one that has that, definitely that expertise. Their project is always to do a design build personal space. I don't know if you've heard of the Cal Poly Slow
Oh, yeah.
Design Village project. That's one of the 2 projects we do.
Oh, okay.
So,
Fantastic.
you
And
know,
I would also loop in Professor William because he talked about it while and then you joined in. But he taught a design build studio also. And so, I think leveraging the talent that you had today, it's like use us. Is all I
yes. And in closing, giving you an example of how that networking happens, the other class I teach at SMC, I invited the students to this lecture. One of my students said, "Oh, my professor, it works at that firm." That's how I met William. Only yesterday. Say, oh my goodness, because I don't get to see him being adjunct and not there. I never met him, don't know him. And then to find out what he does and all of that. And small world, there he is to
Yeah.
help all of you and all of us because he wasn't initially part of the lecture because I just didn't know him. And so there you go. So I've invited him to invite his students to the November 16th event, where we'll be doing a field trip to RDC in their office. One last thing I would like you to close with and just speak a little to the firms that are involved. So it was Studio 111. There is RDC. Wasn't there another firm, something Ruth Perkins? Was it
Oh, so
Ruth?
Perkowitz and Ruth's was the over the course of 43 years, the office has taken on different branding. So those were some of the partners at the time, Perkowitz and Ruth.
Okay.
And then as the firm evolves, maybe they transition out, then you rebrand. So there's still like a legacy with that office. But like I said early on, I thought what was cool about this office is how I joined it 10 years ago, but it feels to me like it's changed in in the course of 10 years. It's been 2 different offices, so it keeps evolving, and so it has this really fresh feeling to it because but at the same time there's still this underlying core, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's still processes and efficiencies that are built over the course of 40 years. Studio 111 is a studio that operates within the overall umbrella of this company, and so they have a very specific mission and workflow, and we have other studios. So we have a workplace studio, we have interior, store planning, retail, placemaking. So some of our staff, they kind of bounce around. They're like, I want to work on mixed use, or I want to work on store planning. And so it is interesting that you have those
Yeah, glad you
opportunities.
said that because that's something that you really have to look at, you guys, is when you see a firm in this overarching name, you have to dig into the weeds and see what they actually do, what they were founded on, what
Yeah.
they've evolved into. One of my former students that's on the call is an interior design program. And
Mhm.
so, and she got to tour your office a couple of years ago when we
Oh,
did a field trip there.
fantastic.
So, it's always you do have to investigate even what you knew them to be over the course of time to know what have they morphed into, because they may be somebody very interesting to affiliate yourself with.
That is true. We've had some staff move from interiors into other parts of the company, and other parts move into interiors. So that even I have a hard time keeping up with what are you doing now? But it's fun, you know. So I'm looking forward to all of you coming to visit our office. I'm going to try to line up different speakers that you can all engage with, and they can share different things. You can ask them questions like, what are you working on? Like, you know, what are some challenges? Like, I would say come with questions, you know, something that will help you, you know, figure all the stuff we talked about. You probably have a million questions. I hope you have a million questions. So use them, you know, get some
So-
clarity through them.
So with that, is there any closing questions? And Abigail is my student there from AZ, Arizona now. So know that it's November 16th. If you find yourself somehow all the way over here, you know where to find us. Just ask us. And of course, you're welcome to go if you come here. But if there are not any parting questions, we all should say thank you to Carlos, and we will, head out for now, and you'll be able to see him in less than a month.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sticking around. And thank you, Professor.
And as you can see, that's really the humbling part of the profession that I find. I don't know how many are like that, but you have a profession where there are so many people willing to share their time and knowledge and learn. And as you can see, he's come here and has given you all he's got and put in a lot into this for nothing. Absolutely nothing.
No,
So give him a
like
hug when you see him.
like I said, your success is my success. So, you know, that's what I'm here for. So I look forward to continuing the conversation, everyone. So and keep focusing on the things that matter. All right.
All right. Okay, guys. We will see you when we see you the next time. I will close and say I think we've said it before. Don't know how many people tuned in late, but a lot of the lectures that we've had can be found on our YouTube channel as they are recorded. And I'm going to throw that in the chat now once again for those that may have missed that, so you can grab that out. And I'll make sure that's shared with the El Camino and SMC family and others. Okay.
All right. Thanks
So
so
take
much.
care. Thanks a lot, Carlos. We'll be talking with you.
All right. Take care.
All right.